Hello, hello, and welcome to Heavy Hands. I'm Connor. That's Phil.
I'm not doing a exhausted, nerdy voice. I refuse. I mean, any more than all voices exhausted and nerdy.
Well, my voice is always nerdy. You don't have to sort of make special note of that just because I was putting on the exhausted part. The nerdy part is innate. Welcome, listeners. This is Heavy Hands. As that other guy, that nerd, said at the top, we're going to be between UFC events next week. Fortunately, well, we'll see what the MMA gods decide. Fortunately, UFC 287 is slated to take place after that weekend interval. And it's already lost 2 fights, or at least had one altered and possibly lost one other. So God knows if our decision to cover 1 or 2 of those undercard gems will become irrelevant within the next week or 2. But that is the plan. Of course, last weekend was Corey Sandhagen versus Chito Vera. Phil, please contain your glee. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about its undercard, and then we're going to talk about a 287 undercard fight. I think we've decided on Rob Font versus Adrian Yanez, because who doesn't want to talk about that? And if it is going to get canceled, then I'd rather sort of live in this moment where I'm still dreaming that it's going to happen, because it sounds great.
Yeah, I'm moderately concerned about the main event, given that there's footage of Pereira being already cutting weight from a week ago. And also Glover Teixeira coming out and being I think Alex Pereira could fight at heavyweight. There's certainly some room there for, again, the biggest middleweight I've ever seen to possibly not make weight, but let's hope he doesn't. He does.
On the other hand, it would still be very funny if Pereira tracked Adesanya down to his new sport where he finally thought he was safe and beat him only to lose the title on the scale. That would be pretty good.
Just you're never going to get it back from me. I'm just too big. Bye-bye.
Yeah. And then he can go to light heavyweight and get submitted by Paul Craig. Yeah. So 287's around the corner. Font Yanez, great undercard fight. Bantamweight, no surprise there. Hot prospect, fading gatekeeper. We will see what happens in that crossroads matchup, but that is the one we've chosen to talk about at the end of today's episode. Before that, Corey Sandhagen, Chito Vera, and some other things happened on the undercard, such as Holly Holm, and Macy Barber on Andrea Lee, and some other things as well. But no further ado, Phil. The fans are yearning. Are you going to disappoint them as I did when Valentina lost her title, and the fire of my rage and hatred had already sort of dwindled? Or are you going to give the people what they demand and let them listen to you absolutely blasting off in your jeans about Chito Vera losing to Corey Sandhagen? Well,
you know what? Because he's such... I mean, this wasn't one of those ones where, you're happy to see... Because I wasn't angry at Chito because I wanted to see him lose or anything. It wasn't some stupid shit fighter has been climbing the ranks and you just can't wait for him to get his comeuppance. Then he finally does, and it's glorious.
Yeah.
It wasn't that kind of thing. Because Chito has been increasingly annoying as a fighter, and this, to me, was the apotheosis of him being annoying. So I just sat there, sort of scowling at the screen, going, yeah, see? This is what happens.
Yeah. And
I wasn't sad it was happening, because it was more just angry parent kind of, this is what you get if you play stupid games, win silly prizes kind of thing.
Yeah. You watched Cheeto smoke the whole carton.
Yeah, I mean, he really did.
And
He smoked the pack of inactivity.
Yeah. That fire pack of inactivity. Yeah, he's either learned his lesson or he is now permanently addicted to inactivity and cannot change no matter what. Yeah, I mean, also there is the cushion both for what might be my disappointment. I mean, I don't know. I'm sort of emotionally neutral on Cheeto. Like, I like Cheeto. He's sort of in the Kevin Holland territory for me. Like, so much of this success is like improbable. I just want to like see cool stuff from Cheeto, really. You know, I don't think he's going to be champion. I think he's still just enough of an oddball where he's not going to break through to that degree. I've kind of made my peace with that. And so both to sort of salve my potential disappointment and to kind of quell your potential joy, is the fact that, you know, not that we don't get predictions wrong, but we definitely saw this coming, right? Like,
yeah,
I
think a great many people did.
Yeah, a pretty straightforward one to pick. And as it played out, it was almost like, it was almost unbelievable, like how predictably the actual fight played out. Like, it was so much the fight that you had imagined that it was like, it didn't even feel real. It was, yeah. If you have any concerns about Cheeto's inactivity and his difficulty in getting going in a fight, which he himself acknowledged, et cetera, and you knew that like the active, creative, strategic Corey Sandhagen was going to exploit that in any number of ways, then like this is the ideal version of the fight that you predicted. It played out as if in a lab.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, what did you make of the two men's performances?
Oh, I mean, as you said, it was exactly sort of what we predicted, and I mean, in some ways, it was even worse.
Mm-hmm.
This was in some. So often we look at fighters, and what you want from them is for them to synthesize together the best pieces of their game. But long parts of this was Cheeto synthesizing together the worst parts of his game. Like the lack of urgency on the floor.
Yep.
He was absolutely damning. Even in some ways, even more so than his, tendency to just back up and give ground on the feet. I mean, in some ways, it's hard to know what he's trying to do on the feet because he just he gives ground the whole time. He's got no sense of cagecraft, and he's like, I mean, even his defense and offense aren't very well synthesized. Mostly he's just like, he is literally just picking off strikes until he can figure out a way to land a same time counter. He's never, avoiding a strike and then coming back. No,
that's it. You hit the nail on the head. He is trying to figure it out. I mean, we've been saying this about Cheeto since the very early days of his UFC career. He is, in one of your many, somehow both extremely specific but also very all-encompassing categories. The Lionhearts is one of them. Mm-hmm. The guy who goes through a therapy session every fight. The guy who doesn't know what he's doing. I mean, that it is like Cheeto's fights are for him like an emotional roller coaster to this day. That's still in him. And I think that's why, Corey Sandhagen discussed in the post-fight presser that Cheeto kept saying to him, whoever wants it more is going to win. And Corey was very admirably, I thought, and speaking very much to the kind of fighter he is. He was like, well, you get to this level and everybody wants it as bad as you. So you have to try to be better than them. That's how you win the fights. That is absolutely the guy Sandhagen is. But in the same way, whoever wants it more is going to win. That is the guy that Cheeto Vera is. He is in there working himself up to it for every moment that he is not actively knocking his opponent unconscious. He's working himself up to it. I don't think he has a plan. I don't think...
No, you get the impression he just... It is like Yoel Romero, it's what he's been compared to, is that he's looking for some perfect understanding of what the opponent is going to do.
Yeah.
And Sandhagen was not doing that. He was just... Sandhagen was just like, I'm going to hit you with this switch up, and then while you are thinking about that switch up, I'm going to hit you with another switch up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he was fighting from both stances. He was hiding his entries, his level change entries behind his knees. He was he was working the body, taking angles, and so on. And he just never gave Tito something to bead in on,
to latch onto. Yeah.
Because Tito was being so passive the majority of the time that the entire all Sandhagen had to think about really was how to mix up his own offense, and he's spectacularly good at that.
Mm-hmm. Not even just mixing up offense. I mean, yeah, the irony here is that Cheeto's style is like it pretends at a certain kind of like flexibility. This kind of mindset approach to fighting. Like, I'm going to be ready for what happens, and I'm going to figure it out as it happens. That seems like the flexible mindset, but in fact, by always having like the initiative, Sandhagen was the flexible fighter. To the extent that there were times when he could just give up the initiative just to like let Cheeto give him something to work with. There were a lot of instances, for example, where he's in there pawing with his jab, he's keeping his lead hand extended as he usually does, and setting up a shot off of it, and then he knows Cheeto wants to take his turn, so he pulls the lead hand back and just puts on a guard. And it's like, okay, now I look like I'm being defensive because he wants to bait Cheeto into taking a stab at him, and then he can counter him. This is a guy who had the initiative so frequently in the fight that he was able to fight off the front foot, but also to go onto the back foot and to control the fight in how he led Cheeto onto his strikes and onto his takedowns. He was just in the driver's seat absolutely the entire time. Without all of it even just being outright, like, it wasn't like Max Holloway, or like Marab versus Piotr Jan, just like non-stop overwhelming offense. There were long spates of that, but it was also just kind of like, I'm in control. It's safe for me to let you try things because, you're doing it because I'm letting you, and I'm going to answer. Yeah, I thought a beautiful fight from Corey Sandhagen. I thought his approach was quite interesting, too. He, once again, looked like he had prepared some very specific things for Cheeto. He wanted to out-wrestle him, obviously. He did a lot of that against Song Yadong as well, so that's a new wrinkle to the Sandhagen game. Not that it's entirely new. He has always been willing to go to the ground, but he has leaned on it in these last two 5-rounders.
Did it quite a lot against Piotr Jan as well. It just didn't work.
It just didn't work. Yeah. And to be fair, like, he's not a great takedown artist. It works because of it slots into the diverse game.
Yes.
A lot of them are not.
It worked because in this particular case, Cheeto's ground game is perhaps even more passive than his stand-up. I mean, again, it's one of those things where he's looking for the perfect opportunity. Cheeto is as we know, like a dangerous submission threat from his back. But much of the ground fight was just spent with Sandhagen posting up in half guard and dropping elbows on him.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, Sandhagen really is like, he's an analyst's dream. Really, like as someone to watch and develop, because again, so many times we've said in fights that he should be making these kind of adjustments, he should be trying to fix up on these kind of flaws, and then he just does it. Doesn't give his back up anymore. Has well considered game plans in terms of directionality and like strike selection, and pace. For this fight, he was like, this guy is going to let me impose my game and my change-ups on him. I'm going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to have lots of change-ups ready to impose. I'm not going to give him time to work his way back into the fight, because why should I? And he's just he's a real breath of fresh air. And afterwards, he called out Merab Dvalishvili, who is the absolute polar opposite fighter to Chito Vera.
Yeah, literally.
There is no more different bantamweight, and in some ways, no more different fighter in the UFC.
Yeah.
Than Merab Dvalishvili to Chito Vera. You're going from someone who's achingly low activity until he hurts his opponent or gets into a war, to a guy who is just the most proactive fighter in the UFC at the moment, just the pace as a weapon guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it just really speaks to who Sandhagen is that he's confident that he's flexible enough and deep enough as a fighter that he can handle both of those completely opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah. He has no illusions that he is hungrier than Merab Dvalishvili. He thinks he can figure Dvalishvili out. And I'm not 100% certain that he can, but you have to admire again, it's not even the sort of brittle confidence that most fighters have. So many fighters have this borderline psychotic confidence, which is clearly a mask for some glaring insecurity.
So most fighters have that insane confidence, and then they'll be like, who would you like to fight? And then they will call out the Jorge Masvidals or the Conor McGregors of that division.
Which is, that's what I mean. The confidence is in some way a shell. Because it's well, if you're that confident, then why are you not doing Neil Magny call-outs? Or you're just I will fight absolutely anyone. Neil Magny is a very confident man. More confident than he should be, given his ability to actually win these fights. Sandhagen has the ability, and I think that's why he's confident enough to call out a guy like Merab. Because he's I'm going to come up with some good ideas, and I'm going to go in there and pit my best strategic thinking against the sort of the endless pace and non-stop shallow ideas that is Merab Dvalishvili.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it would be a remarkable fight. Yeah, I mean, conversely, on the other side, I mean, once again, I found myself looking at Chito and thinking, why do you fight like this?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just from a pure physical standpoint, he fights like he's gonna gas out, or he's gonna get hurt if he commits to a strike. And he's immortally durable. And I almost burst out laughing at some point I can't remember whether it was the first or the second round, where Sandhagen had just been dropping genuinely brutal elbows on Chito from top position, really getting his weight into it. This was not classic Chael, keep it busy so they don't stand you up kind of.
Yeah, he's posturing, dropping his weight on him.
Yes, he was dropping incredibly hard elbows on him. And then at the end of that round, Corey has been opened up by one of the elbows that glanced him on him from Chito from the bottom, and Chito just stands up afterwards, looking utterly unmarked, looks around with the expression of someone who just got into a sauna that was very slightly hotter than he thought it was going to be.
Yeah,
just a little expression of eh.
Yeah. He had a tiny shadow under one eye after 4 rounds of just eating jab after jab after jab. Yeah, he's durable in every respect. Very difficult to hurt, and as you point out, even difficult just to mark up. He can just soak up damage in every way that very, very few fighters can. But it's not, I don't know. I mean, it's like I said last week, I think this is who Chito is at his core. Every other way that he's fought, because he doesn't always fight like this. It's really been these last 3 fights have been Chito Mark 1 revisited. a sort of psychological regression, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But even his other fights where he's really aggressive, they are in some way like a reaction to this being Cheeto Vera's core. It's like, again, it's the therapy session thing. Like, I just don't think it's an easy problem to solve. And it's like, basically you saw Cheeto go through this middle period of his career, becoming a contender, having fights like that one with Song Yadong, which is just a barn burner nonstop action. And then like, it's almost like he got comfortable enough to go back to being the guy that he started as. And maybe he's a little better equipped than that guy used to be. He's certainly got more confidence that it can work, but you could say that that's a bad thing. Like, the crazy thing is that one of my older reads on Cheeto Vera was in his fight with Davey Grant, way early in his UFC career. His first fight with Davey Grant, that is.
Yeah.
And he just like fouled the shit out of Grant because he was just getting held down and couldn't get up. And he was like grabbing gloves and like grabbing his shorts and like eye poking him and all kinds of shit. I think he might have lost a point. He at least got cautioned by the ref many times, and he just kept doing it, grabbing the fence, etc., etc. And that was ages ago. But that's what the 5th round of this fight looked like. Get taken down again towards the end, and he's like grabbing Sandhagen's glove. He's like illegally up kicking him like 5 times. Like he was like turning back into like frustrated little baby Cheeto. Because, yeah, this is what happens when your game has no structure. When there's nothing whatsoever that is systematic about the way you fight. That all the information you're gathering is just like abstract, ready to be interpreted in whatever way is convenient to you. Like, it's a very strong contrast in approaches to fighting and in fighting style. How these two guys gather information, but how differently they exploit that information.
Do think it was also something which was the unfortunate fact that like he had those Cruz and Font fights, that he won them, because you could see him getting worse. You could see him deteriorating over the course of those 2 fights, and yeah, this was really the nadir. This was
like I said, I think he got
just
comfortable,
suddenly realizing that he'd gotten himself to the point where he didn't know how to get himself back into fights, really.
Yeah, which is why he ended it so frustrated. I mean, he was cool after the fact, and he said, I think, showing self-awareness that he has always had, which makes it all the more frustrating sometimes that he can't solve these issues. I'm not hating on the guy, again, my point is always that these issues are difficult to solve. That, changing who you are as a person is the real question of like changing your fighting style. And that is a very difficult thing to do, as any person older than 30 could tell you. But after the fight, he was like, yeah, I just couldn't get going. It was like, yeah, he's right. You could see it. He had a brief burst of activity at like the start of the 3rd round, and then Sandhagen just kind of picked up his pace a little bit and found some takedowns and found some more ways to switch up on him, and he just shut down again. There was no slow ramp up. So.
Oh, and the other thing, obviously, those brief bursts of activity. Someone gave him a card. That is, honestly, that is one of the worst judging calls I can think of in recent memory. That is horrific. I don't think he won a round.
No, I think the 3rd is the only one you could give to him.
Yeah. I mean, I think even then, if you look at it honestly, and you were like, imagine this is the only round of the fight.
Yeah.
Because what people I think people are reading narrative, reading narrative and a change in direction.
Exactly.
From that fight. They're like, oh, Cheeto, from that round. They were like, oh, Cheeto's got his reads now. And he still looks physically unharmed, obviously. Sandhagen is starting to, he looks... He's sort of panting for breath. He looks a bit more sweaty, and he's getting bloodied up. And Cheeto actually lands some strikes.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're honest with yourself, he doesn't win that round. He doesn't win any of the rounds.
Yeah, no, I still gave the third to Sandhagen.
Yeah.
But that does happen. Yeah. You get the reversal of momentum or any shift in momentum, and then you're like suddenly, because nothing has been happening for Fighter B, you suddenly feel like Fighter B is winning because he's doing something now. Clearly, clearly that's what the judge experienced, because I'm pretty sure he gave that round and then the next 2 rounds. I think he gave Cheeto the last 3 rounds of this fight.
Yeah, he must have done. I mean, he would have been absolutely insane to give him rounds 1 or 2.
Well, yeah, but again, like after round 3, if you're paying any attention to shifts in momentum, how do you not see round 4 as just a reestablishment of the round 1 and 2 status quo?
I mean, I don't know.
Cheeto got shut down again very soundly. Like he didn't do shit after round 3. He went right back.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, it's one of the worst cards I can remember in recent memory.
Texas, man.
Yeah.
It really, there's absolutely no defense for that card. I mean, this is, I guess, why it's good not to be like too upset about most decisions, because then it kind of feels like it means something when you act. This is truly thank God, basically, that card did not affect the actual result.
Yeah.
That would be the definition of a robbery.
But that guy, I mean, who was the judge? Do we know? But he just shouldn't.
I think the name was.
He shouldn't judge things very much anymore.
I think the name was Ojeda or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, they also had the dude who like nearly killed a fighter last week judging one of the fights here. That guy who like watched.
Was that the one where they?
The guy got choked unconscious and then got his arm broken.
And then got his arm broken, and the referee didn't step in either time.
Either time, yeah. His arm is getting broken like while he's unconscious. And that guy was allowed to judge the next week, one of the fights on this card. Yeah, it was Joel Ojeda.
Yeah.
Who scored it, last 3 rounds to Cheeto Vera. Completely inexplicable.
Yeah, it's amazing how broad brush the absolute appallingness of the Texas Athletic Commission really is.
Yeah.
I mean, every time you can just be like, some stupid fuckery is going to happen here.
Yep.
100% will. Like, they are consistent. They have depth and breadth of incompetence. Like, there's no area they won't touch. Like, they just suck.
Yep. Anyway, again, thank God it didn't actually affect the result. Corey Sandhagen, very clear win. Hopefully some kind of a course correction moment for Cheeto Vera.
Mm-hmm. I mean, he's called out Piotr Jan, I think. Which
I
think is a fight which makes a lot of sense, and also one which could probably look very much like this. So I think that's a real, I think is a very good fight for them to make, because Cheeto needs to show something different in that kind of fight.
Mm-hmm. And he can do it. Again, he's done it before in his career where he's come out and made the other guy hurt him because he's not quite ready for the fight that's breaking out, but he has to make it break out right away because he doesn't want to get just lose the fight on inactivity. He's capable of doing that. I think he lulled himself back into his oldest habits in this latest phase. So I'd love to see him come out and just go after Piotr Jan. But great.
And Sandhagen, fight with Merab would be absolutely fascinating. But other than that, he might get again, the fighter that anyone else in his position would have actually called out Sean O'Malley.
Yep.
Which
is itself
what
not
else can you say for Sandhagen? He is a fighter's fighter.
And I don't even think O'Malley.
I don't want O'Malley. I want the guy who I think is a harder fight and better than him.
I don't even know that O'Malley would be like a walk for Corey Sandhagen. It would be a tough fight, but
it would be a tough fight. But I would pick him. I would pick Sandhagen much more confidently than I would pick. I would pick him against Merab Dvalishvili. That's for sure.
It's an easier matchup to figure out, especially for a thinking fighter like Corey Sandhagen. But he wants an intellectual challenge, and he's going to get that and a very physical challenge if they make that fight with Merab. Yeah, I hope they do it. I mean, it would suck, I guess, to see Corey Sandhagen knocked back, given that Merab may not fight for the title for some time, if ever. But also, Like, the dude is one of the best, most interesting fighters in the sport, and he wants to take on the toughest challenges possible. Like, how can you deny him that chance? That's ostensibly what we want out of MMA, right? All right. Let's take a break. When we come back, some other stuff happened on this card. We're going to talk about it. And then we're going to talk about Rob Font, Adrian Yanez coming up in 2 weeks at UFC 287. All of that after this.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out, the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it.
All right, welcome back to Heavy Hands. Smorgasbord style here, folks. We're just going to kind of run through a couple of these undercard fights. Nothing really stood out in particular, but there's a little bit to say about many of them. First up, I guess.
You know what happened to me, by the way?
What?
Is that when I was watching this card on the BT Sport catch-up service, I just checked it now. It's still not up. They typically put the entire card up with like timestamps for each one of the fights, right? And it's like I was like, why is Holm versus Santos the last fight? And obviously, like, this is one of those situations where I can't Google it to find out, because then I will instantly, if I go Google Vera versus Sandhagen, I'll instantly get the results of the fight. I will spoil it for myself. I was just like, oh my god. Did a last minute cancellation? Did one of these guys like get food poisoning or trip over something? Because sometimes it happens. You get on the fight night, they suddenly just loses its main event.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh my god, did I speak another Holly Holm main event into being? Just being like, thank god it wasn't. I just got through the whole thing, and it took me forever to actually find a stream of this without like spoiling the results for myself. I was shitting it the whole time.
Well, a happy result then, not only to be rewarded with the actual main event as expected, but Cheeto Vera losing in that main event. I mean, a double prize for you at the end there. No, Holly Holm, Yana Santos did happen. But by the way, this is just for my personal convenience. I'm coming out as a strong advocate against women taking their husbands' names. It's too confusing. Enough. Too many of these female MMA fighters. I never have to relearn a guy's name. They change their nicknames 9 times in their career, but I don't have to remember any of them. I don't have to remember whether Hector Lombard is Lightning or Showweather, or whether Rory McDonald is the Water Boy or the Canadian Psycho or the Red King or Aries. I think he changed it too. They all suck. They all suck. Anyway, yeah, women, stop taking your husband's names, okay? You should be Kunitskaya. I remember that name. Joanne Calderwood, you're the worst of all. Joanne Wood, you just changed to just having part of your previous name. That's extra confusing. I didn't know who Veronica Hardy was. I was like, I know who Veronica Macedo is. I shouldn't even remember who that fighter is, but I remembered you with your maiden name. So stop. Enough. Anyway, Yana Santos.
Fight the patriarchy.
That's right. Yes.
In order to make life more convenient for this one man.
Slightly more convenient for one man. Yes. Anyway, Yana Santos paid the price for submitting to the patriarchy. She lost very, very soundly to Holly Holm. It was, as far as Holly Holm fights go, could have been worse.
Could have been worse, yeah. I mean, it was a lot of Santos just running into the clinch over and over again.
Yeah, she's just like a worse Holly, so.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where Holly Holm is actually, I don't necessarily want to say good.
Yeah, I wouldn't either.
But strong.
Yeah.
He is strong there. And yeah, so she just got thrown around. I mean, this was at least more active, and she got top position, and she did things with top position, and in the great wide expanse of Holly Holm fights that we've seen, this was not in the vanishingly small tail of exciting fights, which is basically Ronda Rousey. But no, it was in style. It set at the. It was in it, but it wasn't in the big fat end of terrible leaf blower kickboxing and wall install. It was just okay.
Yeah,
that's a relief.
That's really all there is to say about it, too.
Yeah.
Holly Holm is. I mean, we could pair this and jump ahead to tie Macy Barber in here. The funny thing is that as different as their games are, that they are both fighters who are really all about the attributes, and Holly Holm basically always has been. She has had
yes,
literally the bare minimum of actual striking technique to get by. And to give people a lot, people who are all just even worse strikers anyway, just to give them a lot of bullshit to think about. And then, she can throw a nice high kick. She's big and strong. So if you run into one of her punches, it's going to hurt you. And then she can grab onto you. And, as you pointed out, she's not even really a good wrestler. She's not a very good clinch fighter. She's not a very good, the awkwardness of her ground and pound when she was on top of Santos. She can't even, easily, generate the force. She's just a really awkward technical fighter, basically everywhere. And if she wasn't, a big, strong freak, then... yeah, she literally is worse than, technically she's, worse than Caitlin Chukagian by, a good margin.
Oh, yeah. Some margin.
But Chukagian is, a normal
huge,
person.
And she's very physically gifted for the weight class, and, executes, her terrible skill set with the, adamantine determination of a two-sport world champion. She's never going to give up on her horrible game plans.
Yep.
And her terrible approach, which is why I honestly dread her fights more than perhaps any other.
Because she has the physicality to make it work, but what making it work means is up to Mike Winklejohn. So
it just means you get these fights where she'll just have these dreadful fights, and whilst you're watching this, you have to contend with the fact that people in the audience are just going wild, and they're just hell yes, Holly.
Mm-hmm.
Hold her up against that cage. Get her.
Yeah, this was as bad as
experience.
This was just as bad as Duraev and Jokoani earlier on the card. Just as low action, low interest. One person was winning the whole time, but they weren't really able to do much with it. And yet the crowd was booing versus Duraev and Jokoani. They were just the roar of the fans during this tepid wall install. I can't explain it. There's no way. Beating Ronda Rousey doesn't get you that much. MMA fans have such fucking short memories regarding everything else. Why? Why is Holly Holm why is her popularity so damn durable? Her fights suck. I don't understand.
I just don't know.
Is it a bizarre, chivalry of MMA fans that Valentina and Holly Holm just weather levels of inactivity and caution that would absolutely destroy the reputation of dozens of male fighters? You don't have to forgive them. You don't have to forgive them for this because they're women. They're women who are fun to watch. Cheer for them. I don't know, but it won't die. The Holly Holm hype will not die. She signed another 6-fight contract with the UFC, by the way, so she's not going away anytime soon. And now that she's back on the winning path, that next Holly Holm main event is guaranteed in the cards. Maybe it could be Holm Tate too. They'll probably do something like that.
Yep, they're gonna spin the old two side, like the Wheel of Fortune, which is only like divided into two semicircles, and on one side is going to be like Holly Holm, and the other one side is going to be like
Anthony Smith.
Heavyweight.
Okay, I thought it was going to be Anthony Smith.
Oh yeah, it could be Anthony Smith. Yeah, maybe it'll be like maybe it's in 3. Maybe it's Holly Holm, Anthony Smith, and a heavyweight.
Yeah, random heavyweight, light heavyweight fight. Yep, I don't know. So anyway, yeah, speaking of physicality, like if Holly Holm was defined by complete reliance on physicality, but the discipline to put that to its most narrowly successful use possible, then Macy Barber also fought on this card, and she's all about the physicality, but she has no discipline whatsoever. This was another one where this one at least makes more sense, the weird scorecard, than
30-27 Barber?
I think 30-27 Barber is better than an Andrea Lee scorecard, to be honest. Because I didn't think Andrea Lee really did fuck all on the ground. All she had was control time.
A lot of it, though.
Yeah, a lot of it. Yeah, Macy Barber couldn't stop a takedown to save her life. So this one at least was enough of like a 50-50 kind of proposition that you can understand the scores being a little wonky. I really do think if you're the kind of judge who likes the damage and you're looking for clean strikes above all else, then if you're going to give Barber one of the rounds, you may as well give her all of them. They were all pretty similar.
Yep.
She was just landing the visibly harder strikes and then getting taken down like 3 times per round. I will say this though. I'll take a Macy Barber over a Holly Holm any day. 100%. Like, she's frustrating. She doesn't learn. But she is a competitor to her core. And one thing you can always rely on Macy Barber for is that no matter how things are going, she's going to come out in the 3rd round and really, really want to win. She's really going to go for it. She is going to throw more power than she's been throwing in the whole fight. She's going to smash into her opponent. She's going to make more catastrophic mistakes than she did previously in the fight. But frequently she wins 3rd rounds of fights she's losing just out of sheer determination and ferocity. And, again, because she has that physicality to fall back on. But I'll take that over the Holly Holm version of a physical monster any day of the week. 100%.
Yes. Sure. And also, you know, there's still a chance that down the road Barber could be okay.
She could get
still
good.
Get flashes of her, like, working in combination, throwing kicks behind punches and so on. She's still good in the clinch and so on. I mean, she's just, you know, as you said, she's a mess everywhere, but she's also willing to fight everywhere.
Yeah.
But she's someone who could just organically probably become, like, fairly decent-ish fighter for the division down the road.
She'll just get better nascently just by continuing to fight, you know?
I mean, she doesn't strike me as a particularly well-trained fighter.
No.
But, again, she fights a lot and she's super young.
Yeah.
She gets injured a bunch. She'll just organically improve.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's the issue that, like, there are young people with technical bases and that they then build on who will simply improve past her, like Blanchfield. But, I mean, she's probably going to be around for a while, but yeah, I think split decisioning Andrea Lee probably means that you're ready for a title shot anytime soon.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose it's good for her, unlike the sort of like other young phenoms that she's like in this division. Like it could be a lot worse. She could be out there soaking up a lot more damage, being as sort of crude as she is technically. So she's, I think, yeah, it betters her chances of improving over the course of her career, of continuing to get better. Cause like, unless it's like Alexa Grasso or something, she's not like out there just getting constantly lit up. Anyway, what else? Anything else happen on this card? Anything at all?
So this was just a card of people from the big weight classes hiding in the bodies of people from the small weight classes. We briefly watched CJ Vergara versus Daniel Da Silva.
AKA Daniel
there isn't
Lacerda.
much to say about it apart from that it's fucking funny.
Apart from Phil chose to watch it on double speed with yakety sax playing. And
it's greatly improved. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, just very funny, but also very light heavyweight.
Very light heavyweight.
You just inflate these guys and throw them in there with, Nikita Krylov or Ryan Spann or whatever, and you'd be right at home.
Yeah, it's almost like a weird thing where you get. Is there like an inversion where like welterweight is the middle? Like bantamweight is like the light heavyweight. Right.
So you know what my next point was going to be?
Go.
That Daniel Pineda is a middleweight.
You right?
Hmm.
So there is like this weird sort of mirror effect, because this is not the first time at all that I have seen a UFC flyweight fight, just talking about Vergara, Lacerda still, where I'm like, these aren't what flyweights are supposed to look like. These guys are weird. They're like really low output. They're like weirdly slow. They have like extremely narrow games. And yeah, like CJ Vergara, Daniel Lacerda is like a light heavyweight or heavyweight or a particularly athletic heavyweight fight. It was so stupid.
Oh, man, if I saw that fight at heavyweight, I would be blown away.
Right?
I'm not gonna lie.
As a heavyweight fight, it's only at flyweight is it like you guys should be embarrassed. This is bad. You shouldn't have CJ. You shouldn't be like turning your back and running the full perimeter of the cage. Daniel, you shouldn't be following the exact circle described by your fleeing opponent, refusing to cut him off while like just having like bits and pieces fly off of your body the entire time because you have no throttle. That's a heavyweight type of fight. Or a light heavyweight at best. And then, bantamweight is like the crazy athletic punchers division. That's kind of like the little equivalent of light heavyweight, I guess. And then if you go up to featherweight, Pineda, Tucker, Lutz, why is that middleweight? Explain it to me. This is a fascinating new theory.
It's just like I was looking at Daniel Pineda and I was just like, this man is a middleweight. He is the classic, like, powerful, slow BJJ guy with a suspect gas tank. What's he doing at featherweight? He's a middleweight. He's like got a good submission game. He's got a well-built, like, power striking game. Gasses himself out like after realistically about 3 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes he can keep it going. He's still got 100% finishing rate.
Oh yeah, he's super dangerous.
Yeah, man is just exactly who I used to like. One of the archetypes I'd think of when I would think of like JJ guys with suspect gas tanks.
Yeah, I was a little saddened by that one though. I kind of like Tucker Lutz.
And Daniel Pineda too, though.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I guess I was just rooting for Tucker Lutz. He had that fight with my least favorite type of fighter, Pat Sabatini, grappler. And I was like, this guy's good. He didn't look as good as he is in that fight because he just had to deal with a really good grappler the whole time and couldn't get out. And then Daniel Pineda just sort of, I didn't even think Daniel Pineda was fighting a particularly good fight. I thought he was...
not really.
He was eating a lot of clean counters in the first round, and... yeah. But he did hit a very strange and interesting, like, a very middleweight, like, submission transition in the second round, where he pulled Lutz down in a guillotine, and Lutz tried to, like, gator roll out of it, which put him into like a reverse bulldog choke, which became a back mount, which led to the ultimate submission. Yeah, middleweight fight. We're going to have to keep an eye on this trend going forward. That division sub welterweight is the, or maybe sub lightweight is like the mirror universe.
I think those two can be grouped together. They are the pivot point.
Yeah, and then there's a mirror universe on either side. Okay, well, enough of that. Let's take a break. When we come back, Yanez, Font, hooray! After this.
Let's hope it happens.
Yes.
Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. You can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show.
All right, folks, welcome back to Heavy Hands. As promised, we are looking ahead now to UFC 287. Of course, the main event, the rematch, Adesanya versus Pereira. Either Adesanya Pereira 2 or Adesanya Pereira 4, depending on how you look at it. And down there on the undercard, not that far, in fact, is a bantamweight fight between Rob Font and Adrian Yanez. And I find this fight to be very interesting. Rob Font, of course, has had two extremely similar losses in a row, first to Jose Aldo and then to Chito Vera. One more brutal than the one prior, if only because like it happened after the one that was just like it. And it doesn't seem impossible that this could be another fight, that this could somehow Rob Font could have fallen into just a pattern that just like ends his career, which would be sad. On the other hand, despite those losses, Rob Font is still one of the most successful high-level fighters Adrian Yanez will have ever fought. And so it still feels like a very reasonable step up, a true classic crossroads kind of fight. So, Phil?
Yeah, I mean, the Rob Font Chito was such a tragic fight.
Yeah.
In so many ways. Because it was really the one where Chito wandered off on this current path, which we just saw where that went. And it was also, it was also where you looked at Font, and even more so than the Aldo fight, you saw someone who was doing everything pretty much perfectly in terms of what he should be doing. He was keeping his pace up, was working the body, was like keeping his shot selection going, and then every now and again he'd get clipped and he'd just lose the entire round.
Yeah. Someone who was doing everything perfectly, at least in the broad strokes.
Yeah, obviously, like, he's still a fighter who, when he defends things, is kind of mostly relying on like, high guard and his reach and his own output and his own offense to be his defense. He's, quite a rope fighter.
Yeah.
They've, his team talks about how incredibly coachable he is, and you can see the sort of negative side of that. Is that someone who takes instruction can also become somewhat predictable. Yeah, I mean, you could just see how much he built on that early game. Just working off the low kicks and the low kicks, the low kicks, the body punches, and like his ability to like jab, post, and uppercut. He's just like a really.
Mm-hmm.
You could see like this is a logically constructed game which should be working, and then wasn't because his durability seems to have just gone.
Yeah. And to be fair, these are for his defensive liabilities. these are two very dangerous strikers that did this to him. Jose Aldo, like even more so in the latter stage of his career, back to being like just a devastating puncher who would just crush people with single strikes, and Chito Vera very much the same. But yeah, it is weird how both fights, one after the other, fit almost exactly the same pattern of Rob Font just sort of winning every moment that he isn't clearly losing the fight. Right? Like just by sheer output, and again, very broad but still like good, as you said, logical ideas. Putting things together that make a lot of sense as long as the opponent is not picking up on these increasingly predictable patterns in how you put those things together. And then once they do pick up on them. So yeah, I find this to be a pretty fascinating matchup because I look at Adrian Yanez and I see, thank God he doesn't have that Chito Vera in him, as far as I can tell, not the Font, the version of Chito that fought Rob Font. He looks a lot more like Jose Aldo in that, he is also a very jab-centric, boxer punchery kind of fighter, a technician who loves to knock people's blocks off. But compared to Rob Font, he does a lot more of his work off the counter and using a much wider array of defensive techniques to set up those counters. Yanez will block and parry, he will pull, he will pivot, he will sidestep, he will slip and duck, and occasionally even shoulder roll. And come back with his shots off.
He'll jab on his retreat.
Yep. Sometimes not as much as I would like. I mean, he did get run over at a couple portions of like the Tony Kelly fight. Where he was just like trying to get away and Kelly was just running at him and he was getting clipped on the end of his punches. But yeah, he uses his jab defensively. He uses it offensively, and he fights in layers much better than like Rob Font does, where he will initiate an exchange with his jab, anticipate the counter, slip it, come back on like the third beat of the exchange with his own strike. A very fluid fighter once he sort of gets going in a fight, which can take a little while. He often starts a little slow. So I don't know, like persuade me that this isn't going to be a horrifying, like PTSD inducing reliving of his worst nightmare for Rob Font. Because the more I think about it, I kind of see Yanez being more than capable of winning in that exact kind of way, if not a more active version of that kind of way.
I mean, that's pretty much what we said after Font's last loss, is that it becomes very hard to see him beating lots of bantamweights now, because this is the power punching division. This, it's full of durable, good athletes. But with big power in their hands, and Yanez is unfortunately one of them. And what he lacks in experience, he makes up for in the obvious level of talent and technical depth he has, despite that lack of experience.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the things that Rob Font can, I think, capitalize on? I think maybe the fact that Yanez does like to slip and rip, and when he's looking to counter, might make him a different proposition to Chito Vera. More than this is the ability for because if you look at the people that Yanez has been countering, the people he's been fighting in general, they are some big swingers.
Yeah, not a lot of Rob Font types in there.
Oh, and it is really noticeable that Randy Costa, who is a very flawed fighter in his own right, but has just very untelegraphed straight punches, just was lighting Yanez up.
Yeah, he's the Michael Chandler of jabs. Go out there and jab the shit out of you for 3.5 minutes and then just be done.
So yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of Yanez's countering game is predicated on people coming at him. I mean, because David Grant is in many ways we talked about how Marab is kind of the opposite of Cheeto.
Mm-hmm.
In some ways, Davy Grant is like the opposite of Rob Font. He's a super organic, weird, hyper durable fighter.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he's a big, ugly. He's also a big, ugly, weird swinger. Which allowed Yanez to kind of show off his kind of cute counterpunching. I mean, what I do think is that Rob Font will have significant chances to push Yanez out of position. Just like come in behind the jab, and then, do his, Font tricks, where he posts up and then uppercuts, goes to the body, kicks the front leg. I don't see why any of this shouldn't work. I think Yanez is very used to being the subtler puncher.
Mm-hmm.
And the, being the jabber in the world of the wild men kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, it just comes down to the fact that, like, Font, whilst he's very clever with what offense he's doing, he's still going to get predictable and repeat the same tricks. And it's the issue that he is simply, his offense, then he's pulling away. And he's offense, and then he's pulling away.
Mm-hmm.
There's never a threat on the retreat. There's never defense on the way in.
Yep.
And that combined with, what has obviously just been his chin disappearing.
Yep.
Just means that you just have to be like, at some point, Yanez is going to clip him. I cannot, it's happened like, what is it, like, 8 out of the last 10 rounds he's fought, if not more.
Yeah, he's just been like nearly fucking crushed, just staggered or dropped, or probably 7, 8.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the most shocking thing is that he hasn't been KO'd.
Yeah, guy's got incredible conditioning and always has, and just seems to recover super well. And it's also a huge credit to Rob Font that he retains the better part of his discipline even when these things are happening, and we'll go right back.
He's not fucking Cody Garbrandt.
Yeah,
that's what made it so sad to watch, is that he would get absolutely fucked up and then just go back to just being like, no, I need to pile up points, I need to win rounds. And if I keep doing this is the right thing to do. Eventually I will be rewarded for it. He wasn't wrong. He's just not really. It was just that, it looks like you physically can't do it anymore.
Yeah. I mean, if it wasn't for that fight Yanez had with Costa, then I think my reaction to the idea of Rob Font being harder to counter because he's like a jab-centric guy. I mean, sometimes the guy like Davy Grant is harder to counter, right? Like, you look at him and he's open to counters in a sort of abstract way, but then you stand in front of him and he's just going for it. He is just swinging meat hooks at your head, and it comes down to actually mustering the nerve to not be bothered by that, not worry about getting hit, and to just plug him straight down the middle. The thing with Rob Font is not even just in neutral space or off the back foot. He's really never a good defensive fighter, and he himself
said, he's coming in with offense.
Yeah,
and then it turns off, and then it's simply just getting back out again.
Exactly, yeah. And while he's throwing, and certainly in that moment after he has thrown, he sort of is like, he will swing like Davy Grant does. He does it a lot. Like, Rob Font's right hand is not often a very pretty piece of technique. It works because he uses the jab so consistently and so well to set it up. And he has a really great flexible jab. I don't even know if subtle is the word I'm looking for, but it doesn't have to be he will stab you with it. It'll be a weapon in its own right, but he will also double and triple it, and he will feint it, and he will use it in all the many ways a jab can be used. But like that's why it takes a little bit to start timing his right hand. Because when he lets the right hand go, he tends to overcommit, and then he has to kind of scurry out of position to get back out of range. And it tends to be a really wide swing. Like when Rob Font throws an uppercut, I love how he uses them, but the uppercut starts at his goddamn cup. Like it is a very looping punch. And so like, I'm not, if it wasn't for that Costa fight and how Costa did seem to really trouble Yanez with the straight punches and the jab in particular, my instinct would be like, no, Rob Font's actually going to be easier to counter. Cause like Yanez knows how to deal with a jab. And he knows how to sort of like look past a jab and find the opening that comes after. And Rob Font is just a much more methodical fighter than Davey Grant to a fault. This is the problem, that there are patterns you can pick up on that a fighter who is clearly like interested in boxing and works on improving his boxing and probably does a lot of boxing sparring like Adrian Yanez. I don't know if he has a boxing background, but he looks like he must. But yeah, like when you encounter the guy who like flummoxes other people simply because he does everything correctly, it can almost be a comfort zone. Like, oh, like I know how this works. I know why he's doing everything that he's doing. I don't have to figure anything out really. It becomes very sort of natural because this is what you've trained for. You've trained to fight other people who are trained to fight you, not Davey Grant. And Rob Font isn't exactly like Randy Costa with his jab either. Randy Costa was very, very aggressive in that fight. And was just smashing Yanez with the jab over and over and over right from the beginning and getting in his face and putting on a pace that, Rob Font's got great conditioning, but he does not fight at that kind of clip where he is with that kind of intensity. And neither can Randy Costa, as it turns out. Few people can. So I don't know. I don't think it's enough reason to think that even if Font does get in a lot of jabs early, that he isn't just going to get figured out and hit with the bigger, more telling strikes. And, as impressive as those first 2-3 minutes were for Costa, Yanez's moment of flipping the switch and getting into the fight were equally impressive. He just immediately was like, oh, okay, it's the jab. It's going to be the jab again. And he just started slipping them, parrying them, and crushing Costa for relying on that one weapon too much. It posed some problems, but that sounds way too much like the way Rob Font has been losing his fights.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I mostly just think that Rob Font can trouble Yanez, particularly early, as he's sort of forced himself into this into this sort of higher volume style from a coaching perspective, rather than I think Yanez, who's pretty much clearly out there just doing what comes naturally to him.
Mm-hmm.
Just like, I'm going to pick up on these guys and I'm going to crush him. Fair enough, he mostly can just do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think Font is just a very diverse fighter, as we saw with Sandhagen. It's really difficult to pick up on stuff like that. As I said, he kicks up the middle, low kicks, body punches, uppercut, so on and so forth, and most of it coming off the jab. I do think eventually Yanez will probably figure him out. But there is a small chance that he can kind of Sandhagen his way to victory. It's also like he's pretty decent on the ground. But yeah, I mean, mainly I think the question for that comes down to, how much can like Font flummox Yanez with his offense?
Mm-hmm.
Can he keep Yanez guessing in a way that, can he keep him on the back foot? I'm just not sure that he can. I would actually genuinely like to see it, just because Font had two such brutally tragic losses, and this seems like such an obvious setup.
Yeah, it really does.
For that to happen again.
I also wonder if maybe this wouldn't be a good time to not be high output Rob Font. And, like, you're the more experienced fighter. Be crafty. Be well-rounded. Like you said, like, lots and lots of switch-ups would probably be a great idea. Try to land a lot of low kicks. Focus on the body work when it comes to throwing anything that isn't the jab. And absolutely mix in some takedowns. Like, there's no reason not to just test Yanez everywhere and try to maybe slow the pace of the fight down. Maybe try to bank on your reach advantage. Because the other thing is, like, when Costa came out that hard on Yanez, or when Davey Grant came hard after Yanez is he's a very responsive fighter when it comes to pace.
Yes.
I think he will fight you much, much harder if he feels he has to. And I think there might be an opportunity here for Rob Font to kind of slow roll it and allow Yanez to kind of get lost in the tactics and let too much of the fight slip away. And in the meantime, he's just banked a lot of jabs. He's landed a lot of low kicks, done a good amount of body work, and gotten some control time and maybe threatened some submissions on the ground. Like, why not press Yanez into the fence? See what happens.
What would Holly Holm do, eh?
What would Holly Holm do? That's the question you need to ask. That's what you need to ask yourself, Rob Font.
Yeah, impossible not to against Font against someone like Yanez at this stage.
Right.
But I would very much like to see him out. He honestly deserves that kind of at this stage.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
Yanez has got a lot of time to make his way to the top of the division, where it certainly looks like he's headed at the moment.
Yeah, he does. Yeah. Okay, well, that'll do it for this week's Heavy Hands. Of course, when we come back next week, we will have our full UFC 287 preview episode on the docket. God knows what will remain of that card by that time. But for the moment, it is Alex Pereira, Israel Adesanya 2/4. It's Gilbert Burns, Jorge Masvidal. It's Kevin Holland, Santiago Ponzinibbio. And there's other stuff too. So we're going to talk about that next week. Find us on Twitter. Phil is Evil Greg Jackson. Connor, that's me, is Boxing Push. Go to the Patreon. I'm panicking, Phil. What's the tagline?
It was fighting time. Now it's over.
That sucks so much ass. That's the best you can come up with. It was fighting time. Now it's over.
Can't remember what it is. You always say some stuff. I'm asleep by this point, generally.
Yeah. I go on my long end of episode tangent. And I'm like, Phil, we have to do a bonus. Oh, please.